Imagine you're out walking on a normal day. The sky is clear, birds are chirping, everything feels just fine, but above your head, something has already gone horribly wrong. Roughly 8 minutes ago, the sun exploded, and no one on Earth knows it yet. That's because light from the sun takes about 8 minutes to reach us, so by the time we see the explosion, it has already happened. We're just living in the final peaceful moments before the nightmare begins. Once those 8 minutes are up, everything changes instantly. The moment that blinding wave of light hits our planet, it's game over. A supernova-level explosion from the sun would send out a shock wave of radiation, powerful enough to destroy the ozone layer in an instant. Earth's protection against harmful ultraviolet rays, gone. Our atmosphere would be ripped apart by a storm of deadly energy. Temperatures would spike to levels we can't survive. And this isn't something that plays out over weeks or days. This happens fast. Most scientists agree that Earth would be hit with extreme heat, followed by a total blast of radiation and pressure, all within minutes of the light reaching us. That's before we even talk about what happens next, because the sun isn't just our light source. It holds the entire solar system together. Once it explodes, Earth is no longer in orbit. Gravity disappears. Our planet would be launched into space like a rogue pinball, tumbling away into darkness with no sun, no warmth, and no hope of survival. Within less than 1 hour, oceans would start to freeze from the surface down. Crops would die, power grids would fail, but that's assuming anything survives those first few minutes, and the truth is almost nothing would. The surface of Earth would be scorched. Cities would collapse, fires would spread everywhere, and once the atmosphere gets stripped away, space itself starts to crush down on us. There's no bunker deep enough to hide from this, no shield strong enough to withstand it. If the sun exploded without warning, this would be the last day for humanity, and most of us wouldn't even see it coming until it was far too late. Once those first deadly 8 minutes pass and the explosion reaches Earth, things unravel fast and quiet, and there's no safe zone. The sun's energy would slam into the side of Earth that's facing it, instantly vaporizing much of the surface. Major cities like Los Angeles, Tokyo, and Sydney would be swallowed in flames almost immediately. Skyscrapers would collapse under the heat, concrete would melt. And it wouldn't stop there. The radiation doesn't politely knock, it bursts through the atmosphere, stripping away everything that makes life possible. Within seconds, forests, lakes, and entire towns would be torched. People in places like Mumbai, Cairo, and Rio de Janeiro wouldn't even have time to react. Most would be gone before they realized anything had happened. Even places not directly facing the sun, like New York City or London, would only have a momentary delay before the destruction wrapped around the globe. This isn't like a slow-moving natural disaster, it's an all-out, full-sweep planetary breakdown. Heat from the sun's explosion would travel in waves, and the pressure would flatten everything in its path. Mountains would erode, rivers would boil, and nuclear plants would go critical as power systems fail one after another. No emergency plan, no warning system, and no global organization could respond fast enough, or at all. Roughly 30 minutes in, the temperature across the planet would already be dropping. Not because things are calming down, but because the sun, our only natural heat source, is gone. In places like Canada, Scandinavia, and the Russian tundra, freezing winds would kick in almost immediately. The atmosphere would still be thinning from the radiation blast, and without gravity holding it close, much of it would start to bleed off into space. That means oxygen would become scarce fast. By the 1 hour mark, the sky would be pitch black. Clouds wouldn't form, rain would stop, and all natural cycles like wind, tides, and weather would start breaking down. Earth would be flying blind through space now. No light, no heat, no direction. People underground might still be alive, but only temporarily. Air would run out. Supplies wouldn't last, and the planet itself would already be shifting, cracking, and changing from the sheer force of everything that just hit it. From massive cities to small rural towns, from deserts to deep ocean floors, there would be no place left untouched. Earth's surface would look more like the moon than a living world. What was once full of color and life would be reduced to ash and silence. And yet, the worst part is, it's not even over. Because now Earth is alone in deep space with no sun to hold it and no path to follow. By now, Earth is completely cut off. The blast from the sun is behind it, but what's left is almost worse. A planet with no direction, no warmth, and no future. Without the sun's gravitational pull, Earth no longer has an anchor in space. It starts to drift, spinning slowly into the freezing black void. The temperature drops fast, Within a single day, the surface plunges far below freezing. Within a week, it would be colder than any natural condition ever recorded. Oceans begin to freeze from the top down. At first, it's just the surface that ices over, but by the second week, entire coastlines are locked in place. Sea life dies off quickly. Coral reefs shatter, fish freeze in solid blocks of ice. Deep-sea creatures that once thrived in darkness now face a new kind of cold, one that doesn't allow for any survival at all. Even hydrothermal vents, which once supported strange life at the bottom of the ocean, start to shut down without surface heat or planetary balance. The atmosphere, now severely weakened by radiation and lacking sunlight, begins collapsing in on itself. Clouds no longer form. There is no rain, no weather, and no wind. The sky stays black. Snow falls only in the form of dry ice, frozen carbon dioxide. Land areas that didn't burn in the initial blast are now being buried under thick, choking frost. In places like Alaska, northern Canada, and Siberia, the ice expands faster than anything seen during the ice ages. Within a month, entire continents are covered in layers of ice thicker than skyscrapers. Power grids around the world, already shattered from the explosion, are now completely useless. Fuel freezes in storage tanks. Batteries drain and stop working. Every satellite in orbit is dark or drifting. Even underground bunkers, built to withstand nuclear war, struggle to keep the cold out. And worst of all, food production stops completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis. Crops die, trees freeze, and animals begin to starve. Any human still alive is facing an extinction-level collapse of every system that once supported life. Communication is gone. There's no way to know who, if anyone, is still out there. Underground survivalists might last a little longer, living off canned food and artificial light, but with each passing day, oxygen runs thinner, and the cold pushes deeper into even the best-sealed shelters. Mental health would collapse alongside physical health. Without day or night, without a clock or calendar, time would feel meaningless. People wouldn't know if it was morning or midnight, and they'd never see the sky again. But even if someone did survive the first month, the question remains, what are they surviving for? Because with the sun gone, there is no rebuilding. No seasons will return, no rescue is coming. Earth has become a frozen rock adrift in deep space, and it's only getting colder. Months have passed since the sun exploded. Earth is no longer the planet it used to be. It's a silent, frozen world drifting through deep space with no source of light or energy. The temperature on the surface is now hundreds of degrees below zero, cold enough to freeze the atmosphere itself. Most gases that once made up our air, like nitrogen and oxygen, have condensed into frost, falling as strange snow onto what's left of cities, forests, and mountains. Every ocean is now a solid block of ice, stretching miles deep. Beneath the surface, pressure keeps some water in liquid form, but it's lifeless. The ecosystems that once made Earth unique are now just frozen layers of the past. The sky has not brightened once since the sun vanished. Earth's orbit is long gone, and the planet now moves randomly through interstellar space. Without the sun's pull, there is no day, no night, and no way to track time. Radiation from the explosion has altered the magnetic field. Compasses don't work, and the planet's internal systems, like plate tectonics and geothermal heat, are slowly shutting down. Even volcanoes have gone quiet, with magma chambers freezing over beneath layers of rock and ice. Structures that once stood tall, skyscrapers, bridges, monuments, are now buried or crumbled. Metal has become brittle. Concrete has cracked apart. The Eiffel Tower, the Great Wall, Times Square, all of it frozen in time. It looks more like an alien world than a place that ever held life. Even light from other stars barely reaches Earth anymore. The darkness is total. By the 1-year mark, any chance of human survival is gone. Food is long depleted, and even the most prepared bunkers have run out of heat, oxygen, or supplies. No sound exists outside of the cracking ice and shifting layers of snow. Earth is officially lifeless, not just on the surface, but in its core, its atmosphere, and its oceans. Fast forward hundreds of years, and Earth is just another frozen planet, so impossible to distinguish from a distant asteroid or icy moon. If an alien civilization ever found it, they might see traces of what was once here. Satellites frozen in orbit, spacecraft left abandoned, or the outlines of cities buried beneath centuries of frozen storms. But they would find no living thing. No voices, no signals, no warmth. Earth would be a tomb, And that's the harsh reality of this scenario. If the sun exploded without warning, it would not just end human civilization, it would erase everything. Every memory, every species, every sign of life, wiped out in darkness, with no chance of return. A world that once held over 8 billion people, thousands of cultures, and billions of years of evolution reduced to silence in under 1 year. Imagine looking up one morning and seeing a blinding light streak across the sky. Within seconds, the earth shakes beneath your feet, the air starts to heat up, and the sky glows like fire. That's what it might feel like if a 5-mile wide asteroid slammed into California. And in this case, there wouldn't be much warning. Even if we saw it coming a few days before, there would be almost nothing we could do to stop it. A 5-mile wide asteroid is about the size of Mount Everest, and when something that massive hits Earth at around 40,000 miles per hour, it's not just a local disaster, it's the kind of event that could change the planet. If it struck on land anywhere in California, the first thing to go would be the ground itself. The moment of impact would release energy equal to billions of tons of TNT. That's more powerful than every nuclear bomb ever made combined. The explosion would create a fireball miles wide, instantly vaporizing everything near the point of impact. Cities, highways, forests, gone in an instant. The temperature would rise so fast that people in buildings within hundreds of miles would be incinerated before they even heard the sound of the explosion. The impact would throw huge chunks of earth and rock miles into the sky, sending a massive shockwave rippling out in all directions. Buildings would collapse, power lines would be ripped down, water pipes would burst. Everything in the surrounding area would be leveled. This wave would move so fast and hit so hard it would be like a hurricane, an earthquake, and a volcanic eruption all rolled into one, but worse. If it hit near Los Angeles, the city wouldn't just be destroyed, it would be completely erased. Right after the impact, a massive crater would form, likely over 50 miles wide and several miles deep. The surrounding landscape would be reshaped forever, and the debris, blasted into the sky, would block out the sun across much of the western United States. Fires would break out for hundreds of miles, burning uncontrollably as emergency systems collapse and response crews are completely overwhelmed or wiped out themselves. But the destruction wouldn't stop there. The energy from the impact would trigger massive earthquakes across the western part of the country. The San Andreas Fault would likely rupture in multiple places, and new fault lines might even open. The shaking would be felt across state lines, toppling buildings in places as far away as Arizona and Nevada. Tsunamis would also be triggered, crashing into nearby coastlines. If the asteroid hit even partially in the ocean near California, the waves would be hundreds of feet tall, slamming into the shore within minutes. This is just the beginning of what would follow. The first few minutes alone would be unlike anything humanity has ever seen. And for the people in California and the nearby regions, survival would depend entirely on distance and luck. Now, the wave of destruction begins to spread across the map. Let's look at what happens next. Within the first hour after impact, the destruction would keep spreading far beyond California. Massive shock waves would roll across the western United States, toppling buildings as far as Salt Lake City, shaking the ground in Denver, and breaking windows in cities over 1,000 miles away. Roads and highways would be torn apart, bridges would collapse, and power grids would fail. Millions of people would be cut off from help, with cell towers down and communication systems overloaded or completely destroyed. The western skies would be filled with thick black smoke, ash and dust rising from thousands of fires. Some started by the heat of the blast, others by broken gas lines and collapsing electrical systems. Inland cities like Fresno, Bakersfield, and Sacramento would be reduced to rubble from the force of the shockwave alone. Buildings that weren't destroyed instantly would soon be brought down by aftershocks and spreading fires. Hospitals, police stations, and emergency services would either be gone or overwhelmed. Survivors would be scrambling to find clean air, shelter, and water. With debris covering the roads and the entire region in chaos, evacuation would be nearly impossible. Planes wouldn't be able to fly through the ash-filled skies, and helicopters could only reach a limited few before running out of fuel or being grounded by dangerous winds. As the blast zone widens, coastal cities like San Diego, San Francisco, and even parts of Seattle would be hit by massive tsunamis if the asteroid struck near the Pacific Ocean. These waves could reach heights of several hundred feet, flooding entire cities and washing away ports, airports, and residential areas. The salt water would flood deep inland, leaving behind toxic sludge and wreckage. Ships out at sea would either be capsized or lifted and hurled onto land by the force of the water. Entire neighborhoods would be swept away like driftwood. Meanwhile, the skies would darken across the entire continent. The asteroid would throw up millions of tons of dust and ash into the atmosphere, carried by the upper-level winds across the country. Places as far as Texas and even the East Coast would soon see ash falling from the sky like dirty snow. The sun would grow dim and temperatures would begin to drop, especially at night. People would be forced indoors, not just because of the danger, but because the air would be filled with ash particles that could clog lungs and poison water sources. By the end of the first day, tens of millions of people across the western half of the country would either be injured, displaced, or missing. Emergency broadcasts would play on repeat if they were still functioning, warning people to stay inside, wear masks, and avoid contaminated water. The US government and military would begin mobilizing, but the scale of the disaster would be beyond anything ever prepared for. Entire states would essentially be cut off, operating without fuel, electricity, or any connection to the outside world. And the worst part, this was still only the beginning. In the next part, we'll look at what happens over the next week and month, how far the damage spreads, which cities survive, and what the world starts to look like as the ash settles. Over the next few days, the damage would grow even worse as the full effects of the asteroid hit start to unfold. California, once home to nearly 40 million people, would now be unrecognizable. Entire city maps would be useless. Craters, collapsed highways, and flooded coastlines would erase any familiar landmarks. Survivors in Central and Southern California would have no electricity, no clean water, and very little access to food. The government would try to deliver emergency aid, but most airports would be destroyed, and the skies would be too dangerous for regular air traffic. Military cargo planes and helicopters would be forced to land in makeshift zones far outside the impact area. Beyond California, neighboring states like Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon would begin to feel secondary effects. Hospitals in cities like Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Portland would be overwhelmed as evacuees flood in, many suffering from burns, broken bones, and lung damage from breathing ash. Grocery store shelves would empty in hours, gas stations would run dry, and traffic out of the west would clog every major road. Entire communities would set up camps in parking lots, schools, or open fields just to have somewhere to sleep. Cities once thought to be safe would struggle under the weight of refugees and the collapse of basic systems. Meanwhile, the skies would continue to grow darker. The dust and ash pushed into the upper atmosphere by the asteroid would start to block sunlight across much of the western hemisphere. By the end of the first week, daytime would look like evening in many places. Crops would begin to die from lack of sunlight, and temperatures would drop noticeably. In California's Central Valley, where much of America's produce is grown, farms would be buried under layers of soot. The food supply chain, already fragile, would begin to break down. The effects would stretch across the country, with prices rising and panic growing. Wildlife across North America would be thrown into chaos. Forests near the Rockies and along the west coast would burn uncontrollably, releasing more smoke into the atmosphere. Rivers and lakes would become clogged with debris and polluted from chemical runoff and dead animals. Birds would fall from the sky, confused by the lack of light, while fish die-offs would begin in both saltwater and freshwater systems. The sound of sirens, distant explosions, and silence where bustling cities once stood would be all that remained in many parts of the western United States. By the end of the first month, millions of people would still be unaccounted for, and entire regions would be labeled as unreachable. National and international aid would begin pouring in, but even the rest of the world would start to feel the ripple effects. Trade routes through California's major ports would be destroyed, stock markets would spiral, and the rest of the planet would watch and wait, wondering how bad the long-term consequences could really get. In the final part, we'll take a look at what life could look like 1 year after the impact, how the world adapts, what's left of the West Coast, and the lasting scars this event would leave on the planet. 1 year after the 5-mile-wide asteroid hit California, the world would be in a completely different place. The physical damage in California would still be beyond repair. Cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, and Sacramento would no longer exist in any recognizable form. What was once dense urban sprawl would now be a mixture of dry craters, twisted metal, collapsed concrete, and growing vegetation trying to reclaim the ruins. The crater itself, several miles wide and hundreds of feet deep, would be filled with stagnant water surrounded by the skeletal remains of highways and buildings. It would become a dead zone, not just from the impact, but from radiation and lingering atmospheric poisons kicked up during the explosion. For those who had survived, life would be about survival, not rebuilding. Makeshift towns would rise in the outskirts of the country, formed from shipping containers, scrap metal, and salvaged supplies. Most survivors would live without electricity, plumbing, or regular medical care. Diseases would spread faster in overcrowded shelters, and clean water would still be a daily struggle. Many would have moved to the east, trying to escape the choking air and find stability, but the entire country would be facing its own set of problems by then. The rest of the Eurasian United States would now be dealing with a completely shifted economy. With California's agricultural centers gone, there would be a long-term food shortage. Farms in the Midwest and Southeast would try to keep up, but the loss of the Central Valley alone would have driven produce prices through the roof. Gas and oil would become even harder to transport, with so much of the West Coast shipping infrastructure destroyed. Unemployment would skyrocket, whole industries tied to the tech world, entertainment and trade would disappear overnight. The economic weight of rebuilding just a fraction of what was lost would be unlike anything the country had ever faced. The atmosphere itself would still be unstable. With so much ash and debris pushed into the sky, weather patterns would shift dramatically, global temperatures would drop. What scientists call an impact winter would settle in. Crops around the world would suffer, not just in the US, but across Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa. The sky would remain tinted in shades of gray, with red sunsets and dim mornings becoming the new normal. Climates would change rapidly, causing storms in places that rarely experienced them and drying out areas that used to be lush. But even with all this destruction, the world would try to move forward. People would form new governments in damaged regions. Aid from around the globe would help keep some areas stable. Scientists would spend years studying the crater, the asteroid fragments, and the effects on Earth's climate. And slowly the global conversation would shift from shock to survival, then to prevention. It would become clear that space isn't just vast and empty, it's filled with potential threats. And after witnessing what a single rock 5 miles wide could do, no one would ever look at the sky the same way again. Imagine waking up tomorrow to a world where every electronic device suddenly goes dark. No lights, no phones, no internet. What if a massive solar flare, also called a coronal mass ejection, hit Earth and wiped out all electronics and power in an instant? This isn't just a minor blackout. It's a total shutdown of the systems that run our lives, and it could happen in just minutes. Right when the solar flare hits, it sends an intense burst of charged particles racing toward Earth at nearly 1,000,000 miles per hour. These particles slam into our planet's magnetic field, creating a powerful geomagnetic storm. Within just minutes, the electric currents induced by this storm would overload transformers and power grids across entire continents. Cities from New York to London, Tokyo to Sao Paulo could lose power almost instantly. At the exact moment of impact, satellites orbiting Earth would be hit hard too. Many would fail or go offline, cutting off GPS, weather monitoring, and communications. In the first few minutes after the flare, airplanes in flight would lose navigation systems, forcing pilots to rely on manual control. Traffic lights would stop working, causing immediate chaos on roads. Emergency services would find their radios dead or severely disrupted. Within half an hour, entire regions could be plunged into darkness as power plants trip offline to protect themselves from damage. The electronic pulses would fry unprotected devices, making phones, computers, and cars that rely on electronics stop functioning. The sun itself might appear eerie in the sky, as intense solar storms often cause vivid auroras seen much farther from the poles than usual. Red, green, and purple lights glowing ominously. Meanwhile, power grids scrambling to respond could experience cascading failures, where one damaged transformer leads to the failure of others, widening the blackout. In the first hour, large parts of North America and Europe could be completely without power, and this blackout might stretch to other parts of the world as the storm's effects ripple globally. By the end of the day, the impact would be undeniable. Hospitals would be struggling to power life-saving machines on backup generators that can only last a limited time. Water treatment plants without electricity would stop working, risking contamination of drinking water. Refrigerated food would begin to spoil. The massive scale of destruction to electronic infrastructure would mark the start of a disaster unlike anything modern society has faced. A true humanity-ending scenario if recovery takes too long or fails to happen. This is just the beginning of what a massive solar flare hitting Earth tomorrow would look like. As the hours pass after the massive solar flare hits, the true scale of the disruption becomes clearer. Without power, cities quickly descend into chaos. Traffic jams form as stoplights fail, and public transportation grinds to a halt. People trapped in elevators or subways face dangerous situations with no immediate way out. The communication networks are mostly dead. No calls, no texts, no internet. Cutting off families and emergency responders from each other. In the first 6 hours, hospitals and emergency centers rely heavily on backup generators, but these only have fuel for a limited time, usually a few days at best. Without electricity, many medical devices, including ventilators and diagnostic machines, begin to fail, putting lives at serious risk. Food stores close as refrigeration fails, and soon panic buying spreads in areas where power remains on, but most places already face empty shelves. The timing of this disaster makes it even worse. If it hits during winter, heating systems stop working, leaving millions vulnerable to freezing temperatures. In warmer climates, air conditioning failures cause heat waves inside homes and buildings, which can be deadly for the elderly and sick. Water supply systems suffer too, as electric pumps stop working, causing shortages of clean drinking water and sanitation problems that could lead to disease outbreaks. Governments and utility companies scramble to assess the damage, but the geomagnetic storm has fried transformers and electrical components over thousands of miles. Replacing these parts is slow and difficult because many are custom-built and can take months or even years to manufacture and install. International aid is complicated by the fact that many countries are affected at once, limiting the ability to help one another. By the end of the first day, it's clear that this isn't just a temporary blackout, it's a massive breakdown of modern infrastructure. Millions of people are stuck without power, clean water, or communication, and the emergency services are stretched beyond their limits. The disaster is unfolding fast, and the world faces the terrifying reality of a long, uncertain recovery ahead. As the second day after the massive solar flare unfolds, the damage to society deepens. With power grids crippled, many cities remain in total darkness, causing widespread fear and confusion. Without streetlights or traffic signals, accidents on roads increase sharply, and emergency responders struggle to reach those in urgent need. The blackout affects airports and railways, grounding flights and trains, which isolates communities even further. Many people begin to realize that this won't be a quick fix. Gas stations can't pump fuel without electricity, so vehicles become useless, making transportation a huge challenge. Grocery stores, addresses that manage to keep some supplies quickly run out, and with no refrigeration, food spoils rapidly, increasing the risk of hunger and food shortages in urban areas. People start rationing what little they have, but without restocking, supplies dwindle fast. Communication remains almost completely down. Without cell towers or internet, people rely on battery-powered radios or emergency broadcasts if available. Social media, emails, and phone calls all gone, cut off personal and official communication. This lack of information fuels rumors and panic in some regions. Governments work to send out emergency messages through satellite channels, but coverage is limited. Water scarcity worsens as electric pumps remain offline. Many households run out of drinking water, and public fountains or wells are overwhelmed with demand. In some places, the lack of clean water causes hygiene problems, which raises fears of disease outbreaks. Hospitals struggle even more as their fuel reserves deplete and backup generators fail to support all critical systems. Power companies begin prioritizing repairs on essential services like hospitals, water treatment plants, and emergency centers. But replacing the fried transformers and damaged infrastructure is a massive challenge. Some areas may be without power for weeks or months. Meanwhile, communities try to adapt by using candles, wood stoves, or hand-powered devices, but life becomes a struggle without modern conveniences. By the end of day 2, the full scale of the disaster's impact on daily life is undeniable. Society is pushed to its limits as people face uncertainty, shortages, and isolation. The path to recovery looks long and difficult, and the world braces for what comes next. As the crisis moves into its 3rd and 4th weeks, the reality of a world without reliable electricity sinks in deeply. With most major cities still powerless, daily life is forced to adapt in ways no one expected. People begin to rebuild routines using old-school methods, manual tools, printed books, and face-to-face communication replace the digital conveniences that once ruled. Markets reopen, but mostly with basic goods, and bartering becomes common as money loses some of its usual power without digital systems. Medical care faces a critical test. Hospitals struggle to treat patients without modern equipment, relying heavily on limited supplies and the dedication of healthcare workers. Vaccination programs stall, and minor injuries risk becoming deadly due to lack of proper sterilization. Many people turn to home remedies and community healers, while emergency aid tries to reach the most vulnerable through trucks and makeshift clinics. The disruption to global supply chains leads to serious shortages of fuel, food, and medicine. Governments scramble to coordinate international aid, but damaged communication networks and broken transport systems make it slow and complicated. Some rural areas surprisingly fare better by relying on local resources and small-scale farming, while big cities face greater challenges due to their dependence on imported goods and electricity. By this stage, power restoration efforts are ongoing but slow. Replacing damaged transformers and rebuilding the grid is a massive engineering challenge, requiring time, resources, and cooperation among nations. Some regions may take months or even years to regain full electricity. Meanwhile, public morale wavers, and social tensions rise as people struggle with the uncertainty and hardships. The long-term economic impact starts to emerge, with businesses closed, stock markets halted, and governments facing immense costs. But amid this devastation, communities learn resilience. People discover new ways to live with less, rebuild local support networks, and rethink their reliance on technology. While the immediate aftermath of the massive solar flare shows the fragility of our modern world, it also highlights the strength of human adaptability. In the end, this event would be a massive reset, a reminder of how much we depend on electricity and technology. The path forward would be difficult, but survival and rebuilding would be possible, though nothing would ever be quite the same again. What if a powerful blast from deep space suddenly wiped out life on Earth in just minutes? Imagine a gamma ray burst, or GRB, blasting our planet with intense radiation so strong it could end humanity almost instantly. These bursts are the brightest explosions in the universe, releasing more energy in seconds than our sun will produce in its entire 10 billion year lifetime. While they usually happen millions or even billions of light years away, if one were to aim directly at Earth from a nearby star, the consequences would be devastating. A gamma ray burst happens when a massive star collapses or when two neutron stars collide, shooting beams of deadly gamma radiation across the cosmos. These beams travel at the speed of light, so we wouldn't have any warning. The burst would slam into our atmosphere, stripping away the ozone layer that protects us from harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun. Without this shield, radiation levels on Earth's surface would skyrocket, causing widespread damage to living cells and leading to almost immediate mass extinction. The initial flash alone would be powerful enough to fry everything exposed on the planet's surface. This event is not just a bad day for humanity, it's an extinction-level disaster. The burst would destroy the delicate balance of our atmosphere, leading to a chain reaction of effects. Intense radiation would break apart nitrogen and oxygen molecules, producing dangerous nitrogen oxides that would further eat away at the ozone. As a result, Earth's surface would be bombarded by lethal UV rays for years to come. The sun's protective blanket would be gone, leaving all plants, animals, and humans vulnerable. In just minutes, the gamma ray burst would deliver a lethal blow to life on Earth. But the fallout wouldn't stop there. This cosmic explosion would trigger wildfires across continents as the intense radiation ignites forests and grasslands. The heat alone could be enough to start uncontrollable blazes, turning vast areas into ash. At the same time, the sudden collapse of the ozone layer would cause global temperatures to fluctuate wildly. With no protection from the sun's rays, parts of the planet would scorch while others suffer from extreme weather shifts. The scale of destruction from a gamma ray burst hitting Earth is hard to fully grasp, but it's safe to say it would be one of the most catastrophic events our planet could ever face. This isn't just science fiction. Astronomers have found evidence of past gamma ray bursts in our galaxy that may have impacted life millions of years ago. Understanding what would happen helps us appreciate how fragile our existence is and how cosmic forces beyond our control could change everything in an instant. The moment a gamma ray burst hits Earth, the damage would spread fast and wide, wiping out entire cities and regions almost instantly. The initial blast of gamma radiation would be so powerful it could penetrate buildings and fry electronic systems, shutting down all technology in its path. Major cities closest to the burst's impact zone would face near total destruction. The radiation would cause electrical storms and electromagnetic pulses that knock out power grids worldwide, throwing humanity into darkness and chaos. Beyond the immediate destruction, the intense radiation would trigger fires across forests, grasslands, and urban areas alike. These fires would burn uncontrollably for days, fueled by the dry conditions caused by the burst disruption of Earth's atmosphere. The thick smoke would blot out the sun, creating a dark, smoky sky that could last for months. This nuclear winter effect would cause temperatures to drop sharply, adding to the planet's suffering and making survival even harder. On a timeline, the first few minutes after the burst would be the deadliest. Radiation levels would spike, killing any living things exposed on the surface almost instantly. Within hours, wildfires would rage and spread, destroying homes, habitats, and food sources. In the days that follow, the ozone layer would remain severely damaged, allowing lethal ultraviolet radiation from the sun to reach Earth's surface without any protection. This would cause widespread radiation sickness and increase cancer rates among survivors, if there were any. As the weeks passed, the damage to the atmosphere would cause unpredictable weather patterns. Violent storms, extreme temperature swings, and droughts would become common. Crops would fail due to lack of sunlight and poor growing conditions, leading to food shortages around the world. The disruption to ecosystems would ripple through the food chain, making it difficult for animal and plant species to survive. The destruction wouldn't be limited to any one country or continent. Gamma ray bursts don't care about borders. The entire planet would face the consequences, with cities on every continent suffering from fires, radiation, and infrastructure collapse. The loss of communication and transportation networks would make organized rescue or relief efforts nearly impossible. Humanity's ability to respond to the disaster would be crippled from the start, making survival a desperate fight against overwhelming odds. In short, a gamma ray burst hitting Earth wouldn't just harm one area or cause localized damage. It would be a global catastrophe, destroying cities, causing long-lasting environmental damage, and pushing human civilization to the brink of collapse in a matter of minutes to days. The full scale of destruction would be unlike anything in recorded history, marking a terrifying end for the world as we know it. After the initial devastation, the longer-term effects of a gamma ray burst hitting Earth would become even more devastating. One of the biggest problems would be how the burst would strip away a large part of our ozone layer. This layer normally protects us from the sun's harmful ultraviolet rays, but after the burst, it would be badly damaged and take years, possibly decades, to recover. Without this protection, intense UV radiation would reach the surface, causing severe harm to any plants, animals, and humans still alive. Skin cancer rates would soar and many species would struggle to survive. The burst's impact would also cause a collapse of the food chain. With the skies darkened by dust and smoke, plants would not get enough sunlight to grow properly. Crops would fail across the globe, leading to widespread famine. Animals that rely on plants or smaller animals for food would also suffer, disrupting ecosystems everywhere. This chain reaction would make survival even harder for humans, who depend on these natural resources for food and clean air. Another serious consequence would be the permanent damage to Earth's atmosphere and climate. The particles released into the air would cause extreme weather changes. Some areas might experience severe droughts, while others could face massive storms and flooding. These chaotic weather patterns would make farming and living conditions extremely difficult. Cities already weakened by the burst's initial impact would struggle to cope with these new challenges, increasing the risk of societal collapse. The damage to technology and infrastructure would also play a huge role in how this disaster unfolds. Power grids and communication systems would remain offline for months or even years. Without electricity, hospitals, water treatment plants, and food storage facilities would fail, making it nearly impossible to provide basic needs. Transportation systems would also be disrupted, cutting off supplies and slowing down any relief efforts. This isolation would make recovery slow and painful. Finally, the psychological and social effects on survivors would be profound. The sudden loss of loved ones, homes, and familiar life combined with the harsh conditions would lead to widespread despair and chaos. Governments and organizations would struggle to maintain order, and many people would face an uncertain and dangerous future. The gamma ray burst wouldn't just destroy the Earth physically, it would tear apart human society itself, creating a crisis that would last for generations. As the years pass after a gamma ray burst hits Earth, the planet would face a long, slow road to recovery, if recovery is even possible on a large scale. The damage to our atmosphere and ecosystems would linger for decades, with the ozone layer taking a very long time to rebuild. During this period, life on Earth would be forced to adapt to harsher conditions, including much higher levels of ultraviolet radiation. Many species would go extinct, while others might evolve to survive in this new, more dangerous environment. Human society, if it still exists in any organized form, would have to fundamentally change. Cities and infrastructure, destroyed or damaged by the initial burst and the following environmental chaos, would remain in ruins for many years. Food and clean water shortages would continue to be a major problem, pushing survivors toward finding new ways to farm and gather resources, often in small, isolated communities. Technology would have to be rebuilt from the ground up, but with limited resources and knowledge, progress would be slow. The psychological scars left on humanity would run deep. Generations born after the event would grow up knowing only hardship, loss, and struggle for survival. The memories of the gamma ray burst and its destruction would become a part of history, told as a warning about the fragility of life on Earth. The burst would serve as a reminder of how vulnerable our planet really is to forces beyond our control in space. In the end, a gamma ray burst hitting Earth is one of the most extreme threats to life imaginable. It could wipe out nearly all living things in a matter of minutes and leave the planet a much different place for hundreds or thousands of years. While the chance of this happening is low, the scale of devastation it could cause makes it one of the most terrifying what-if scenarios for humanity's future. Understanding this helps remind us how precious and fragile life is and why exploring space and studying cosmic events is so important to help protect our home.